Hmm. Hi, folks. I'm live. So, good evening. I'm very glad to see you here. Things are a little different. I didn't have the promo up, so I'm starting immediately. Also, I'll need your help to share this because I've not had any time to share. We'll see how this goes. For some reason tonight, my CPU is overloaded. I don't know why. I've done everything I can to lighten the load on the CPU. But for some reason, right now, it's a problem. Anyway, what I want to start off with today is a discussion of the planning Pramila Jayapal is doing to maximize the chances to actually get a Medicare for All bill, or at least a substantial improvement in healthcare coverage, actually through the House. And some insight in this has come our way through a video that was done by Marianne Williamson. And I'd like to go through parts of the video here, interrupting it in order to do commentary on it. So I hope you like that part, of this particular broadcast. I'll cover that first. Well, I think she's, but to answer Dia Swift's question on this, she may have had COVID or may still have it a little bit, but I guess in her case it was never very serious, and I don't think she actually took a break from her planning, or her actions. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is share the screen. With the video from Williamson, and I will hope that I'll be able to use that in the way that I hope to be able to use it. Hang on a second, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with that. But if my computer will cooperate, I may be able to get to that quickly. Let me check one other thing while I'm at this. If you'll forgive the slow response of my computer tonight. Oh, by the way, for those curious, I'm feeling fine. I seem to have had some kind of 24-hour craziness going on yesterday. But I feel fine now. I am actually sharing the screen yet. I'm just trying to cope with the difficulty of having the video come in. But let's see now. Here it is. This is from about 26 minutes in. Thank you, Evelina. And thank you, Kay. And thank you, Dolores. And Dia says that's fantastic news. Sound and movement. Kay is delayed on YouTube. Yeah, I'll bet it is. And Steve says, hi, Kay and Doc. Hi, Steve. Missed you. And Dia said, a little 6-year-old renamed the COVID vaccine the Fauci ouchie. I thought that was so cute. It is cute. And Steve said, share. Thank you, Steve. Please share as much as possible. So, well, the Jayapal is having some difficulty coming in.
You're not going to be able to do it. I ran, you might remember, Marianne, in a primary that was a 9-way primary for a seat that had been
Okay, so obviously this is not going well. Doesn't look like it doesn't look like this video is going to come in for me.
occupied by a Democrat for 28 years. So there were a lot of people lined up who believed that this was their seat. They were entitled to the seat. I was told not to run. I was told to run for something else. I was told that I wouldn't be able to raise the money I needed to raise. It ended up being the most expensive non-swing district race in the country because, like California, we have a top 2 primary. I ran against somebody who was running on a more, centrist, business-friendly agenda, a Democrat. And I won. But we've got to be able to do that and change the makeup of Congress. Otherwise, we're not going to have the votes. We don't have the votes right now. And that's the thing that people don't understand.
I understand, and I have tremendous respect for you, and I see everything you're doing. I'm your biggest champion. And you said a couple of things just now. You said, we have to raise the money for the progressives. You've got Democratic corporatist elite leadership who is actually spending money in race after race to suppress the progressives. It's not just a matter of progressives not being able to raise the money. You've got your own leadership who's going around saying, we don't even want you to run unless you have a lot of money, so you're more likely to get money.
But we did it anyway. I'm not saying we did it in every single situation, but I'm thinking about the House. We worked in the House because last time that happened to us. We had the D-Trip putting money in against progressive candidates like Eastman, like Gina Ortiz-Jones, and progressives stood up against that, and those people got close with our help. And this time we were able to get them on the D-Trip's list of red to blue candidates, and we were able to...
Okay, so there, I don't understand what she's saying when she's talking of Gina Ortiz-Jones. It's my understanding, and I researched this fairly carefully at the time in 2018, that Ortiz-Jones was one of the favorite candidates of the DCCC, okay, at that time. She was someone who would come up through school, through favorite schools. She was someone who was taking money from the corpse. She was someone who was placed into a district, a House district, okay, in Texas, to run because she had a Hispanic name, had a success story. She was right when it came to identity politics. She was in no way a radical. In fact, okay, in no way a progressive, except from the identity politics standpoint. So with Kara Eastman, the mention there, I think she's quite right. But okay, with Ortiz-Jones, I think she's off base. Anyway, to go on.
Get the D-Trip to commit that they wouldn't run against progressive messaging. Did it happen 100% of the time? No, absolutely not. But this is what I'm saying. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, we actually made some big inroads. I think we progressives just don't know how to even recognize when we get wins or victories. Yes, but if we're going to keep engaging people, we have to be able to have a vision of what we're calling people into. And we have to be able to celebrate some of the wins. And, you know, I think about the immigrant women who have been living in the shadows, that I've been arrested on the streets of DC and Seattle and all across the country, you know, pushing for immigration reform. They need us to also be able to give hope. And so that's, I guess, you know, I like to come at things from a perspective of ferocity, generous ferocity, let's put it that way. And the ability to really imagine what we have done right and to build on it and to be stronger and to flex our muscles and build courage, because there's not enough people who have it. That's just a reality.
You do display generous ferocity. It's why so many of us absolutely adore you. However, I've counseled people for over 30 years, 35 years. And when people sit in front of me and they have problems, I always want them to remember what they've done right. And I always want them to think in terms of what they've done right and can do right. But I also submit to them that in order to heal their lives and to change their lives, they're going to have to look in the mirror. And the Democratic Party, I understand what you're saying. Well, we have to be positive. We have to see what we've done right. We have to build on what we've done right. But I believe we also have to look in the mirror. And everything that you've said, even though, you know, you said to me, I'm an infrastructure person, and I understand that, and I can appreciate it. But if I'm some college kid out in the Midwest, they don't necessarily understand the nuance. They just understand that Medicare for all is not being put on the table, and they don't care why at this point. But they don't.
That last time we got 3 hearings in the House of Representatives, official hearings in the committees of record for the first time in the history of the United States Congress. That didn't happen by just people saying, "Oh, we should do it." It happened by people mobilizing, putting pressure on Congress, fighting and negotiating within Congress on the rules package. The reason we got those hearings is because we said we weren't going to have the votes on the rules package, and so we were able to get.
So that was a tough question, actually, that she got, okay, from Williamson. Okay, and so Pramila was on the spot. And so she started to point out what it was possible for the progressives to gain inside. And she started beginning to try to sell the idea that what they got in terms of hearings during the 116th Congress, okay, the last Congress, was important. It was something that had been done for the first time. It was progress internally. What she hasn't addressed is from the viewpoint of the people. It's not much progress. It's not fast progress. It's not very visible to people. So what Jayapal is trying to do here is to, to make it visible and try to explain to people why credit is due for the progressives' efforts for getting this much done, considering what was actually stacked against them. Now, I'm not going to validate this point of view. Okay, all I'm trying to do is to give you the point of view, to summarize it for you, and then I want to play some more of it.
The hearings committed to, and we got those hearings. We got over 50% of the Democratic caucus supporting Medicare for all. Did you know, Marianne, that before I introduced HR 1374, there was no Medicare for all bill? There was a resolution. It was about 18 pages long. It was the one that John Conyers had put forward for 20 years. But there was no detailed bill of how we were going to get it done.
Tell me the plan.
We got into the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force, through the Unity Task Force, Health Task Force, which I co-chaired. We were able to get significant pieces of Medicare for all into the Biden platform. We didn't get Medicare for all. We knew we weren't going to. Our candidate lost. All of our candidates that supported Medicare for all lost. So Joe Biden won, so we knew he had put a stake in the sand around the Affordable Care Act. What were we able to get in there? We got a commitment that healthcare would be untethered from employment. That was huge. We got a commitment that any public option would be administered by Medicare and not by a private insurance company. You don't know how big that is and how hard we are going to have to fight for that, because they are all.
So she's saying that from the collaboration with Biden on the Unity task forces, they got commitments for the platform that was significant ones, and that they can leverage, she thinks, to somehow persuade Biden to actually follow through on some of the promises that he made, okay, in terms of the platform. Now, he never yielded when it came to Medicare for all, but he yielded on the idea that there would be health care available to everyone, some way, somehow. Okay, doesn't specify, okay, exactly how, but this was considered by Jayapal to be a big victory. She also talks about how there was never a detailed plan with respect to people in the Congress to actually get Medicare for all. Now she's going to start talking a little more about the detailed planning. But before she does, I'd like to get you to recognize that when the forced vote campaign, okay, was going on, and AOC was receiving criticism on Twitter, at one point, what AOC replied to one of the critics was by saying, "We have a plan for getting Medicare for all," and Jimmy Dore replied to that and cut her seriously by saying, "What plan have you got?" In other words, he replied actually through a video, and he said, "There's no plan. I don't see a plan. You haven't told us anything about a plan. I mean, that's BS. What is their plan? Okay, what kind of planning, okay, is going on?" What AOC was basically saying is that there was a plan in Congress that a number of them had joined together in order to create a plan to bring the Medicare for all bill to the floor. So now we'll go on.
Already chomping at the bit to get that public option and administer it the way that Medicare Advantage plans, for example, are administered. We got a commitment that we finally tackle long-term care. That was put into my bill for the first time, the giant elephant in the room. We got a commitment that we would eliminate the 800,000 people that are in the long-term care waiting list and create 600,000 new long-term care jobs, mostly, by the way, women and women of color jobs. We got a commitment for the most aggressive pharmaceutical pricing that we have ever had, better than what we passed in the House of Representatives, that any pharmaceutical drug would be negotiated across all payers, and that no American would pay more for their pharmaceutical drugs than they pay in any other country. So we got a no deductible plan. I mean, I could go on. I have like 3 pages of what we were able to get. Now the question is, can we get Biden to deliver on those things? We put out in our 6-month agenda that we think there are other key ways to expand Medicare right now that would put us on the path to Medicare for all.
Okay, so let's explain this. She's talking about we got a commitment. Okay, we got a commitment. What kind of commitment did she get? Okay, and where? She got a commitment in the Unity Task Force. Yes, in the Unity Task Force. So she got a commitment from Biden's task force that she was on. But she didn't get a commitment from Nancy Pelosi. She didn't get a commitment from Schumer. She got a commitment from Biden's Unity Task Force. Now, what does that actually mean in relation to the House? What she needs is commitments for floor votes. So what has to happen? Let's say that Biden recognizes the commitment from the task force, and he's willing to go to Pelosi, okay, and say, we want floor votes on these various things that came out of the Unity Task Force. I want that. I want to ask you for that, Nancy. Okay, or I ask you for that, Nancy. Now, in that situation, is Nancy likely to comply? Okay, or is she likely to say, well, I'm sorry, Joe, I'm not for Medicare for all either, and I don't want to put these little pieces in because that's going to put things on the path to Medicare for all. Okay, so I'm not sure what she got really constitutes a plan that's relevant to the Congress. Okay. But then she slightly shifts her ground here. Okay, and I'll go on again and you'll see where she shifts her ground.
What are those? That is dropping the Medicare age to 50. Biden committed to 60. I think we need to go to 50.
Right.
We added covering all kids up to 25. And so if we can get those pieces in, that will be a significant step forward. But in addition, we have gotten a commitment already to do a hearing in the Small Business Administration Committee on the Medicare for All bill. We just got a CBO, Congressional Budget Office, assessment of a single payer system that tells us what we all know, but it comes from the CBO, which is significant.
Okay, now she shifted to talking about what she's gotten, okay, in Congress. She doesn't clearly distinguish that some things she's gotten, like, but for example, okay, a commitment in the task force to take the Medicare age down to 50, okay, and to children who are under the age, okay, of 25. Now, those commitments in the task force are significant because if bills could be passed to get everybody covered over the age of 50 and under 25, it wouldn't be Medicare for all yet if those got through the Congress. But a large proportion of the deaths due to lack of insurance actually are among those between the ages of 50 and 65. And of course, it's important to cover the children who are 25K and under, okay, as well. So if we could get that through Congress, it would leave people subject to the insurance companies and subject to the risk of not having health insurance from the ages of 26 through 50. Okay, and that would mean that the fatalities due to lack of coverage would be substantially reduced. So it would be a material improvement to the situation, and it would also be a material improvement in the sense that lowering the age in that way and raising the age in that way would put us on the path to Medicare for all in a way that having a public option does not. Okay? Because it takes a considerable part of the population away from the insurers and puts them into the government sphere. If she were able to go further than that and increase the benefits so that it was basically the benefits were the same as in her HR 1384 bill. And those were the benefits for the people 50 and over and 25, okay, and under. That would be very significant. Okay, but what she did almost in the middle of that sentence, certainly in the middle of the paragraph, is she shifted from talking about commitments that they had gotten.
The Medicare for All would cost significantly less than any.
But from the Unity Task Force, but two commitments that she had gotten to get certain things in Congress, like new hearings, okay, in Congress. Okay, so there's a kind of a, I'm not so sure it's that subtle a shift, but it's a barely perceptible shift from talking about gains in the Unity Task Force to gains in Congress. But that's a big difference in arenas. Okay, in other words, there's a big question here. There's no commitment, okay, from Nancy Pelosi to go along with the recommendations from the task force. There's no commitment from the Democratic caucus at large to go ahead with what was approved by the task forces, okay, Biden's task forces. Those are just two different things. Okay, now in this context, I should mention by Jayapal's efforts within the Congressional Progressive Caucus, because those are very important. Okay, very important. There's been a reorganization of the caucus, for those of you, okay, who don't know. The caucus from the last session had 100 people on it. But there were many people, I don't know how many, who weren't really progressives who were in the caucus. I'm not sure why they were in the caucus. You know, maybe they label themselves as somehow belonging to the progressive movement, but they're definitely establishment Dems. And the Progressive Caucus did not operate in such a way as to place any discipline on its members to vote in a particular way. So it was virtually an empty organization in terms of influence because they weren't able to mobilize a definite block of people in back of what they supported. They were in no way like the Freedom Caucus, for example, inside of the Republican Party, simply because they didn't have any unity, okay? So certain reforms, okay, were made. First of all, reforms of the internal rules of the caucus. which basically now allow people only a few votes to go some other way before they can be disciplined inside of the caucus, including getting thrown out of the caucus. Okay, so constraints on the freedom of caucus members to go against the positions of the caucus were imposed. Furthermore, the caucus now doesn't have co-heads. It used to be Jayapal was the co-chair of the caucus, and she had another co-chair, Pocan, from he's from Wisconsin, I believe. Okay, so but she and he were the co-chairs of the caucus. Okay, and of course, when there are co-chairs, the same authority doesn't adhere to the leader, because they both have to agree. So Pocan has now withdrawn as one of the officers, okay, the caucus, and Jayapal is the sole head of the caucus. She designated Rokana as her vice chair, and her whip as Cori Bush, and there was a fourth position as the secretary of the caucus. I think the position is secretary, okay, I forget. Could be policy chair of the caucus, but that was given to by Ilhan but to Ilhan Omar. Okay, so 2 members of the squad have positions of authority now in the Progressive Caucus. That was not the case before. They're part of the leadership of the caucus. Okay, and Rokana is now part of the leadership of the caucus. And he and Jayapal, before the squad, were the most progressive people in the caucus. So the CPC has been taken over by the most progressive people in the caucus. So that's good from the point of view of policy directions and from the point of view of supporting positions that are progressive. And seeing the firebrand Cori Bush put in as the whip of the caucus, that is very, very significant, because she's going to do whatever she can to round up the votes. And the change in rules of the caucus, okay, is going to make it clear that the only people the caucus wants to have in it are those who are ready to stand with the progressive, with the views of the caucus and the positions it takes when it comes to legislation. So I think that's very clear. I expect that in this session of Congress, there are going to be a lot of people who withdraw from the caucus, that the caucus is going to be far smaller, maybe 50 people, okay, or 40 people, but it's going to be a caucus that sticks together and is filled with people who are likely to fire plans that are constructed by the leaders of the caucus with the assistance of other people inside the caucus. Since the leaders of the caucus are she and Kana and Cori Bush, okay, and Omar, you can be sure these plans are going to be fairly aggressive. Within the context of the reality that they need Biden's support to get some action out of Nancy Pelosi. Now, I'll have something to say about that, okay, in a little while, because you know my views on replacing Pelosi.
other system or a single payer system. They didn't say Medicare for all. And so that positions us now to hold a big hearing on that piece to show all the myths that are out there. This is how we have to move it along. Now, the thing that people have to understand is wherever you are, you need to be in those districts where we have Democrats and Republicans who are not co-sponsors of the bill to get people onto the bill. I do not want to have a vote on a bill that is going to fail. So I need to get.
Okay, so what she's talking about now is using the hearings that she's getting to highlight the truths about the bill, okay, the Medicare for All bill. What bill is she talking about? She's talking about the reintroduction of H.R. 1384, her bill, which is the gold standard bill for Medicare for All, as recognized by the major lobby groups in back, okay, of Medicare for All. Those are Healthcare Now and its sister organizations, Physicians for a National Healthcare Program. You'll find them, okay, at pnhp.org, and they are the source for all kinds of resources on Medicare for All. What she's telling you that what the goal of the hearings will be is to spread among the public the salient facts concerning Medicare for All and the benefits that it can bring to the population. And she's saying that highlighting those facts in public and combining them with a public campaign by the lobby groups, interest groups numbering in the hundreds. She's saying there's going to be a campaign for Medicare for All. So let's find out when that campaign, okay, is going to take place. She's also implying they've been laying plans for this for some time. This is not something just out of her head. And in the context of AOC's comments, okay, on Twitter, I think there's a connection, because what she's talking about here and what AOC was alluding to, but which AOC would not give details about. Why would AOC not give details about it? Why? Because who's the leader? Who's the leader of the Medicare for All movement in Congress? It isn't AOC. It's the lady you're looking at right now. She's the leader. She's the one who wrote that particular bill, which Debbie Dingell, by the way, co-sponsored and helped also to write. Okay? So Jayapal is the leader on that score. Okay? And the squad is basically following the leader because they feel that she and the CPC are indeed committed to Medicare for All. They see her, and you have to remember, Jayapal ran as a Democratic Socialist. So, AOC wasn't the only one running as a Democratic Socialist. But also Rashida is not the only one running as a Democratic Socialist. Ilhan is not the only one running as a Democratic Socialist. The original person running as a Democratic Socialist in Congress, other than Bernie Sanders, was Pramila Jayapal.
More co-sponsors on the bill so that I am sure that we can win the vote, because it will set us back years if we have a vote that fails on Medicare for All. That will be the end of the movement, where people will say, see, we have.
Okay, so I don't agree on that, and I think Williamson agreed far too easily. Far too easily. It seems to me that a vote on Medicare for All, with the debate that will focus people on this vote. In other words, if there's a proper campaign to support such a vote, and the campaign is from all the interest groups, and the campaign is on social media, okay, as well, the attention of people will be riveted on that vote and will be riveted around the debate around the Medicare for All vote. And that will do much to mobilize support for Medicare for All. It may fail. It may not pass. But nevertheless, the first attempts to pass it could result in a swelling of support for Medicare for All. I don't know what the basis is for thinking that having such a vote would be catastrophic. I don't agree with that. I think it would be part of the mobilization of the movement, the further mobilization of the movement for Medicare for All. I don't think Williamson should have given way so easily to the rather casual way in which this was taken as a given by Jayapal. Okay, in other words, I give Jayapal lots of credit for understanding the inside of Congress and how you go about things inside Congress to move things forward in Congress. I think she's studied this, she knows about this, and we want to respect her experience about this. But that doesn't mean that she's right when it comes to gauging the effect of what a forced to vote situation would have on the external movement before Medicare for All. She thinks it would be catastrophic on the political scene. I don't think it would be catastrophic. I think it would mobilize the movement in back of Medicare for All. So I certainly don't agree with that.
Had a vote and we couldn't get the support for it. So I think that is a terrible strategy. That is not the strategy I want to pursue, because I want to win. I want to win. I want to get health care for everyone. Single payer, guaranteed, universal, no private insurance premiums, no deductibles, comprehensive care for everyone, not tied to employment. And I have been working with an incredible movement of people, grassroots, labor unions. For the first time, Marianne, last year, we got something like 23 labor unions signed on. We don't have all of them. That has been a part of our problem, is some of the unions that have their own healthcare plans and have put a lot of money into them. And we haven't quite figured out how to deal with that issue and how to make sure that workers don't lose the money that was taken from their paychecks and put into those systems. So these are the pieces of work that have to happen. If somebody wants to call for us to force a vote on Medicare for All, I am happy to tell you why I think that's a bad idea. It will end our movement. And I refuse to let that happen.
Okay, I appreciate you explaining that to me. I appreciate everything that you just said.
Okay. There's no way it's going to end our movement. It will end our movement, maybe end our movement or weaken our movement, if the situation is really one where, let's say, the vote fails in Congress with less than 100 votes for Medicare for All. If that's the case, it might be discouraging for the movement. Yes, might be discouraging for the movement. But let's say the vote is something like 160 votes for Medicare for All, or 170 votes, where it takes 218 to pass it through the House. That would not be such a serious defeat, and it would focus attention further on those Democrats who voted against Medicare for All, on those who claim to be progressive, but who voted against it. Like, for example, Hakeem Jeffries, who is being groomed to be the successor to Nancy Pelosi. What happens if there's such a vote in there and Hakeem Jeffries votes against what 88% of the Democrats in the country want? That would be a tough vote for Hakeem Jeffries, to take. It would be a tough vote for a lot of the leadership to take. How do I know? Because when there last was a tough vote like this on the TPP, the leadership was reluctant to take any votes at all. And in the end, all the leadership joined the majority of the caucus. At that time, 188 people, okay, were Democrats, and 160 people were voting against the TPP. Okay, it was actually the vote on the TPA having the authority to actually negotiate, okay, the TPP, okay, and get an up or down vote, okay, on Congress. Okay, so the TPA was about that. Okay, but 160 Democrats were against, okay, the TPA out of 188 Democrats, 5/6 of the caucus. So the leadership didn't feel comfortable going with the 1/6 of the caucus. They ended up voting with the 5/6 in that particular situation because they were constrained, if they wanted to continue to be leaders, to vote with the majority of the caucus. But lots of establishment Dems defected. They voted for the TPA. That's what would happen in this instance. But how many would feel free to do it with 85% of the voters out there for Medicare for all? Okay. So what I think is, if the public campaign in support, okay, of Medicare for all was strong enough, if the social media campaign was strong enough, I think you would see Democrat after Democrat caving to the Medicare for all position, not daring to vote against it. Or if they did vote against it, being willing to negotiate a compromise position that gave the Medicare for all people almost everything they wanted. And if there were a close vote on Medicare for all, I think it would embolden the movement. I don't think it would discourage the movement. So I think what the results are of that vote actually counts. It doesn't have to be a winning vote. It can fall short of a winning vote. If they get 3/4 of the Democratic caucus, that's enough. In this case, I think 3/4 would be something like 175 to 180 votes. That would be enough to embolden the movement and make the elections of 2022 be on Medicare for all. And then woe to the Democrat running in a primary who is against Medicare for all. Then the first things that would be taken up in 2023 would be Medicare for all. Even after, we have to remember, if the floor vote for Medicare for all were to fail, there would still be a positioning for a compromise. It would fail because the Democrats had put forward a compromise position of some sort that got enough for the caucus to think that if they voted for the compromise, they wouldn't be summarily voted out. So therefore, having a floor vote for Medicare for all at some point might help a great compromise towards Medicare for all, essentially giving up most of what would be gotten by Medicare for all, because people would be afraid of going completely against it and then preparing the way for an easier vote for Medicare for all in 2023 in the 118th Congress. So I think that's what would happen. I think Jayapal and Williamson are wrong about this, both of them.
I needed to hear some of that. Let me ask you a question, though. With what you just described, what's your timeline?
Well, we're asking for these things in the first 6 months, right? So, but the Medicare, I mean, what we really want to bring to the floor are these pieces of expanding Medicare, and doing it within the context of the pandemic makes a lot of sense. The AFL, the AFL has been working very hard with some of our partners, our labor union partners. They just put out a statement saying that they're supportive of dropping the Medicare age to 50, where we want to cover kids. If we can get those bills through, and even if it's just contingent on the pandemic moment, that gives us the ability to continue the fight. The hearings, I think the Small Business Administration Committee's hearing, we're hoping to have in the spring, and we're hoping to get the energy and commerce piece going as well within the first year, within the first 6 months. We're already scheduled for a rollout. I believe it's the first week of February for the Medicare for All bill. That will be a big moment for the Medicare for All movement to come together. I've been working.
So the first week in February, she's going to roll out her Medicare for All bill, HR 1384. That should be a tremendous time where we get a continuation of the Force the Vote campaign in back, of Medicare for All. Now, don't expect that campaign to be successful. But what I'm saying is, let it be a continuing campaign, one that doesn't flag, one that continues the mobilization every once in a while on social media for Medicare for All, so the Congress people can see that the support never flags, that it goes on and on and on. Every time there's something in Congress that goes on with Medicare for All, every time there's a hearing, every time there's a maneuver by any of the supporters, of Medicare for All, there's a new Force the Vote campaign, that goes on until finally there's a movement that develops in Congress itself in back, of Medicare for All. I have to emphasize here, if we could get Medicare for All through the House, she's not talking about getting it actually through the House, but if we could somehow get it through the House over the next 6 months, it would not pass in the Senate. I don't think it would pass in the Senate because I don't think the administration is going to take it up. And obviously, you need the administration for it to pass. And the reason why you do is even if all the Democrats would vote for it, which is unlikely in the first place because you got Joe Manchin, his daughter is profiting from not having Medicare for All. Is he likely to vote for Medicare for All? I don't think so. Now maybe some of the Republicans might come over. There's sufficient pressure in their states for Medicare for All. I don't know whether Mitch can hold his whole caucus against it, even though it seems he can. But the basic point is, if we get it out of the House and it goes to the Senate, what the Senate is likely to do is pass their own health care bill, which probably won't be Medicare for All, but will probably be some compromise bill. So they're offering something reflecting more of the Biden position. At that point, it goes to a conference committee. If we can pressure enough so progressives get on the conference committee, then a good compromise that advances Medicare for All in the way I suggested would be a terrific thing to get a good part of Medicare for All in this session of Congress, and then to go on and get it passed fully in 2023. Anyway, going on now.
Let's see if we can put our hands on the moral arc of the universe and bend it more quickly towards justice. I think people listened to us, they gave us a shot. But if we don't deliver in the next 2 years, actually deliver real relief and show that we are for working people, I think we'll lose many of those voters for a generation to come.
Okay, so that's it, folks. what I wanted to do was to present you with Jayapal's thinking on this, to see what her attitude is and to see the way she's moving, to give you, okay, an understanding of how someone internal to the Congress is thinking. They're thinking about getting movements, okay, in Congress and then coordinating those movements with interest groups established on the outside, formal interest groups whose leaders they're able to negotiate with, okay, and to bring aboard, because they move from the standpoint of actually bringing along hundreds of these groups to back their play in Congress. And that's important for them rolling up support within Congress, because the other Congress people look on these groups as able to deliver certain voters for them across the country. Okay. Now, it isn't necessarily the case, however, that people self-organizing on social media, in Facebook, okay, and on Twitter, that those people are on the same page as the interest groups supporting Jayapal in her planning and coordinating with her on her planning. So we, the people who are self-organizing on social media, may have a different view of things. And I think the squad and also Jayapal have not yet figured out how to deal with the self-organizing groups on the outside, who these days also have a lot of influence through the alternative media and what we're building on alternative media. And you can get situations where you got in the force the vote campaign, because since the squad themselves through the fall failed to communicate with their followers, and Jayapal as well, and the CPC in general, failed to communicate with us what they were doing inside of Congress and what their plans were to bring this along in the spring, there was no opportunity for a dialogue with us, with people basically coming from the bottom up. Okay. In other words, to some degree, all of these people we're talking about, all the CPC members who are truly CPC members, okay, all these people, okay, are people who believe in Bernie's not me, us point of view, that there is a not me, us type of movement out there. But even though they believe in the not me, us movement, they don't yet understand or comprehend, okay, it seems to me, how to dialogue with the not me, us movement, with the groups of people who are out there who are unorganized and who desperately want Medicare for all, who desperately want a Green New Deal, and the many other initiatives that we support. When I say they haven't learned how to dialogue with us, if they're making plans, okay, in Congress, they have to let us in on those plans if they want support for themselves, and if they don't want independent campaigns to crop up among us. The Force the Vote campaign, for a while anyway, did considerable damage to the squad, okay, and to AOC, basically to the reputations of these people. They were even getting charged, okay, with being sellouts. Now, I never believed that they were sellouts for a minute, but I do believe that there was not a continuous campaign to dialogue with the grassroots across the country concerning what our opinions were as to how to approach Medicare for all. It seems to me that one important strand, okay, in our opinions was that we thought that in the matter of actually getting Medicare for all out, that it was very important to get rid of Nancy Pelosi, because she was obviously a strong enemy, okay, of Medicare for all, who could not be counted upon even to be neutral when it came to Medicare for all. We had a situation during the election, okay, of Nancy Pelosi for the speakership on January 3rd, where even a small number of the Progressive Caucus could have blocked her from the speakership, forced her to withdraw, and opened up a negotiation with possible successors. There could have been people who would have emerged from that, who would have been much more friendly to Medicare for all. But Jayapal and her associates decided on their own to make the decision not to oppose Pelosi. I think they should have consulted with the Me Not Us movement through social media. They should have asked people what they thought about them voting for Pelosi again. But instead, they took the decision upon themselves. And that decision has had, I think, great consequences for the Medicare for All movement. It could have been an opening gun in the battle for Medicare for All. But for some reason, Jayapal and her associates didn't see it that way. They saw it as basically reasonably well divorced, okay, from Medicare for All. Now, they did get the concession on pay-go, which for the duration of the pandemic is favorable to doing some things to improve healthcare availability at a low cost to people, and maybe even Medicare for all for the duration of the crisis. But that's as far as it went. Okay. So that is what I wanted to say about Jayapal. The only other thing, okay, I'd like to add to that is that I was talking to Lana Dell yesterday, and she had attended a call, okay, the NNU was holding a few days ago, I guess on Friday. No, I'm sorry, on Thursday night. Okay, and in that call, one guest of the NNU on that call was Debbie Dingell. Okay, but Debbie Dingell is a very aggressive supporter, okay, of Medicare for All. Now, she's not a squad member. She's not a person considered but the most radical person. She's a friend, okay, of Nancy Pelosi's through long associations. Long associations over the year, over many, many years. Okay. As the wife of John Dingell, and then as the congressperson herself, okay, when her husband finally retired, okay, she's been in Democratic Party circles and fundraising circles for a very long time. But when it comes to Medicare for All, she is as firm and as radical, okay, as anybody. Now, and she expressed herself in that way in this call, okay, in this NNU call. I mean, she was really a fire eater in her pronouncements. So, she is one of the people who might have emerged from a conflict over the speakership. She had a very good chance because she has contacts with not only the progressive side of the caucus, but with the conservative side of the caucus, and especially the people in the center of the Democratic caucus, who, by the way, are to the left of the country. Okay. So she would have been able to whip up support across the caucus if she had made a bid for the speakership, but she would never make such a bid until her friend Nancy Pelosi withdrew. So the squad and some other progressives had the power in their hands to block Nancy Pelosi. And had they done so, then some people would have emerged. And one of the people who probably would have gotten the permission of Nancy Pelosi to run even. There are probably a few people who would have gotten permission. Probably Barbara Lee, probably Jan Schakowsky, probably Karen Bass, and probably Debbie Dingell. Any of those people would have been much better when it comes to Medicare for all than Pelosi. But Lana says here, yes, Deb Dingell is the bomb. Well, I don't know if she's the bomb or not, but she's pretty forthcoming and pretty much a fighter, like her husband was for all those years when he was the longest serving congressman in history. And she was married to him for a good many of those years, since 1980 or so. So she's been in a lot of fights for Medicare for all for a long time, and she knows everybody involved in the movement. And she was one of those with a chance to merge if Pelosi had been blocked. So I think that Jayapal, I think the Progressive Caucus blew it. I'm not trying to excuse the error they made. I'm saying I think it's an error. But what I'm also saying is they were going forward with a strategic plan that made sense to them. And even though we might not think the strategic plan was right, even though we may think they should have consulted with us and should have learned what our views were when it came to Nancy Pelosi, and they're going against her, I think they should have done such consultation, not as a special case, but I think that the elites in Congress that we elect to positions of power should be constantly consulting with the grassroots, not through established organizations, not through the lobby groups that are well known to Congress, or even the ones that have recently arisen. But I think they should also be trying to consult with people who are self-organizing and who are continuously self-organizing. That's what bottom-up democracy is all about. And if these people are committed to bottom-up democracy, that's the way I think they have to act. Okay, so I took far too long for that, but I'm going to move now to reconciliation and discuss that, because I think discussing reconciliation is somewhat important. I don't think it's all that important, because I'm still thinking that reconciliation, that we shouldn't do reconciliation. I'm against reconciliation. I'm for getting rid of the filibuster. I think that's what Schumer should do, okay, in this particular situation. But I'm going to hold that for the time being. let's go to reconciliation first. And I have an interesting article by Jonathan Ticini, who, in case you don't know it, is also another Democratic, a socialist with a long history, who occasionally has run for office in New York state politics, and who's a pretty good thinker, and who had a piece on Substack that was about the Democratic, that was entitled, "What the Hell is Reconciliation?" And I'll get that up as soon as my laggard computer decides to respond. If you will bear with me for a moment while I share the screen, we can go through Jonathan's piece. It's a very good piece. It's still not up, so I can't see it yet. Still loading. But as soon as it loads, I will pick it up for you. I might as well share the loading. Now you're seeing a blank screen. In a moment, and Lana says, "This is where you need the theme music, Dr. Joe." I know I need the theme music.
Go ahead and sing.
Maybe I'll sing. I'm a big fan of "Do You Hear the People Sing?" Or is it "Can You Hear the People Sing?" I never remember. So it's up for you now. And What the Hell is Reconciliation? By Jonathan Ticini in his Working Life newsletter, which is on Substack. And he says, a little preview here, looking to write up some upcoming What the Hell on student debt and other topics. Now, this newsletter, as I get into a bit of a regular schedule, it's been tough, honestly, so far, because paying work gets in the way, you know. We'll do a lot of what I've done for many years, try to break down economic ideas into understandable bites. To wit, what the hell is reconciliation? You've probably heard so much about. And I don't mean the false calls for unity and bipartisanship. More on that came a new post. I mean the budget process reconciliation. Why is this important to know? It's highly likely anything of significance in the next 2 to 4 years has to do with spending government money on anything one can call progressive or hell, even mildly liberal rationale, will need to pass the Senate using reconciliation. That's how the Affordable Care Act became law. Yes, one element of the Affordable Care Act was done through the reconciliation process. While both houses of Congress have to pass any budget bill, but reconciliation is far more crucial in the Senate. It only needs a majority vote and cannot be blocked by a filibuster that can only be broken with 60 votes in support of a measure, i.e. a supermajority vote that would require that stomach-turning, quote, bipartisanship, unquote. Couldn't agree with them more about the bipartisanship. The only good bipartisanship is dead bipartisanship. Anyway, and because Bernie Sanders is now you can quote me on that, because Bernie Sanders is now the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, it is almost certainly a tool he will use to get big stimulus and funding for progressive policy to a vote. In fact, he has written publicly that he intends on doing just that. And beware, there are limitations on the reconciliation gambit we all have to be aware of so people aren't freaking out. Okay, so people will freak out anyway. Okay, so how does it work? And hold those hard political questions for a moment. Let's say Joe Biden proposes a $2 trillion stimulus package, which includes a whole lot of spending for more relief, and specifically big money for states and localities to plug budget holes. That last bit, state and local aid, was something Republicans absolutely opposed because, well, stupidity and ideology. The Republicans would surely block such a bill using the legislative filibuster if it was brought to the floor as a, quote, normal, unquote, piece of legislation, which is another reason the filibuster should be done away with. The Republicans already nuked the filibuster for judicial nominations, which is how you have Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Coney Barrett on the court, of course. How does this all start? The passage of a budget resolution, which can lead to a budget reconciliation bill, typically begins in the House and Senate budget committees. There it is, folks, the committees again. Importance of the budget committees. The budget resolution lays out the parameters of the spending proposals. It needs to pass both chambers of Congress with a majority vote. So with such narrow margins in both chambers, you need agreement from the whole Democratic caucus on the basic parameters of the budget reconciliation bill. That is to say, the whole Democratic caucus in the Senate, the whole Democratic caucus in the House, both of them have to agree. Okay, that's not so easy to get. Once the budget resolution bills pass, they set the it might be easier now that Bernie is the chairperson of the budget committee. Once the budget resolution pass, they set the parameters for each committee and the relevant appropriations committees, say the one on transportation or health and human services, on what its budget should look like. Okay, so the parameters basically are parameters for how much they should spend, and perhaps any taxation they should include in the bill. And perhaps also anything they should do on the bill with respect to getting rid of the debt limit or expanding the debt limit, because they don't have the guts to simply get rid of the silly debt limit. The silly debt limit that causes so much trouble in terms of crises in the Congress. Then that whole kit and caboodle gets rolled into a single bill that is introduced onto the floor. Doesn't have to get rolled into a single bill. In other words, there is in Congress the idea, the concept that there can be a reconciliation bill passed on spending. There can be a reconciliation bill passed on taxes, and there can be a reconciliation bill passed concerning the debt limit. Okay, so those three things are separate things. Okay, they can be rolled into a single bill, but they can be voted on separately. How would that be advantageous? Well, I'll get into that, okay, a little later. Now for the problems. Let's divide those into technical and political. That's a good idea. Technical, investment spending. Note that as much as possible, I try to use the I try to avoid using the word but deficit, quote unquote, because it has today, at last, an unfortunate and wholly unneeded but negative meaning. And in parens, I wrote a whole book, updated 2013 version, with a subtle title, quote, "It's not raining, we're getting peed on," unquote, concerning the deficit myth. He wrote a book in 2013 about the deficit myth. Of course, Stephanie Kelton's new book is a much better book, but then again, she had 6 more years to work on her book. I wrote a book which was in part on deficits also in 2013 with an updated 2014 version that was called "Fixing the Debt Without Breaking America," and it was on platinum coins and how they could be used. But anyway, go on. We are investing money in the country, says Jonathan Tassini. Okay, the limitation on investment spending in a reconciliation bill is that it cannot increase. Sometimes the word has to be used, deficit, for the years beyond the budget window, which is typically 10 years. So Congress could increase infrastructure spending for the next 10 years, but would have to stop the new spending or pay for the beyond 10-year window with tax increases or spending cuts. So it's deficit but neutral after the 10 years. In practical terms, this doesn't have to be a barrier at all, because once something is in place for 10 years, it has the chance to stick around. It's a dumb rule, he says, but it is what it is. There's another reason why it's a dumb rule. It's a dumb rule because Congress cannot even accurately project, the CBO cannot even accurately project for 6 months out, much less for 10 years, much less for more than 10 years. It cannot make a beyond 10-year window and make a reliable judgment in any sense that there would be no need for tax increases or spending cuts after 10 years. So it's all pure bullshit. That's what it is. It's completely silly, but it's the rules, right? So to pass it, they got to play by the rules, right? That's one of the problems with reconciliation. You got to play by stupid rules that make no sense. The reconciliation can't be the dance partner for each musical number. In fact, it's limited to once a year. The 3 elements of a budget bill, spending, revenue, and a debt limit, could be taken up in 3 distinct bills, but they would all then be almost certainly combined in a final bill. There is some thinking that in theory there could be more than one reconciliation bill, but let's not complicate the picture today. Actually, there was no budget resolution passed for 2021. That means Congress could do 2 in 2021. That gives Bernie opportunities. The fiscal year is October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021. And one next year. So there could be 2 reconciliation bills passed between now and September in this year, and then one for the next fiscal year. So Bernie could get 2 bites of the apple with these reconciliation bills this year. So that's good. But Jonathan says, don't forget the House. As I hinted earlier, the House also has to pass a budget resolution, the budget by reconciliation bill. But the main point here is to get around the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. The House already has a majority vote rule, no filibuster. So the only real rub there is to make sure the House bill matches the Senate bill. That's a rub. Gotta say, that's a rub. What trouble can be made for the bill? So I'll try to streamline this a bit. Yes, in the Senate, one can have amendments considered for a reconciliation bill. It's usually done in a vote-a-rama that goes on for hours and hours into the late hours. The fact that I've watched this shows you the sad state of my Netflix practices, okay, of viewing and perhaps social life. Jonathan is complaining about his social life. The House majority, I don't have any complaints about my social life because I have the wonderful Bonnie. The House majority has a little more power to limit amendments. Each bill comes with a rule that structures the debate on the bill, and it typically limits the time and number of amendments. So, that is interesting, but to speak to the votorama, what has to be done, during the votorama is that people will keep on bringing up amendments that bring the reconciliation bill out of the framework of what the House has already agreed to. In other words, the House will have passed a reconciliation bill that frames things in the same way as the Senate, right? In other words, what's going to come out of Bernie's committee is going to be something framed to be consistent with what the House does. Part of the votorama thing is a conflict with everybody trying to put in amendments that all have to be voted down in order to keep consistent with what the House has done. Now, he points out here the House majority has a little more power to limit amendments. Each bill comes with a rule that structures a debate on the bill, and it typically limits the time, and the number of amendments. Now, that can become significant because if the Senate changes a reconciliation bill in a way that makes it inconsistent with the House bill, then the reconciliation bill can come back to the House for another consideration. And at that point, if the House majority has more power to limit amendments, then the votorama in the House, can be one which has more power to limit amendments and to bring the whole process to a close. Anyway, going on. Byrd, this is Senator Robert Byrd, of West Virginia, breaches from the grave, in case you missed him. For the youngest set, Robert Byrd was a longtime senior Democratic senator from West Virginia, who, by the way, was a Medicare for All supporter. A Medicare for All supporter. Very powerful in the Senate. Once the majority leader of the Senate and longtime senior Democratic senator from West Virginia, and a friend of Teddy Kennedy's also, but as always must be mentioned, a once upon a time Ku Klux Klan member, because Democrats had plenty segregationists in the ranks from the South in the old days. I don't know why West Virginia is considered from the South, since it was the state. The formation of West Virginia, the state, resulted from the secession of West Virginia, but from Virginia during the Civil War, because they wanted to be a northern state and not a southern state. But anyway, there were lots of segregationists in West Virginia, and there were Ku Klux Klan there too. So Robert Byrd was one of them. Anyway, who exerted a fair amount of power from his perch on the Appropriations Committee, and of course when he also got to be the majority leader of the Senate, if I recall correctly. From that came the Byrd Rule, which set some limits on what is inside the reconciliation bills. By the way, he was also the guy who came up with the compromise on the filibuster that knocked down the number of votes needed to break a filibuster from 67 to 70. That was good. But what was bad is he also put in certain rules with respect to the filibuster, which were later interpreted to allow the existence of what is now called the silent filibuster, which means that all somebody has to do in order to block a bill in the Senate is to say that they're going to object to the bill. And that is these days considered a filibuster. In the old days, when you opposed something and you wanted a filibuster against it, you actually had to stand up and filibuster and hold the floor for all that time. And eventually the filibuster would be broken. Even the longest filibuster in history, which is a filibuster jointly conducted by a number of Southern segregationists to block the civil rights bills. Okay, I believe that filibuster was broken in 60 days. So at least you could eventually always break a filibuster. But this silent filibuster with 60 votes has actually proven much more effective at paralyzing the Senate and getting anything done. So just to be straight on what's going on with the filibuster. But then there are these reconciliation bills. Okay, and so Jonathan expresses the limits are in these terms. You can't fuck with Social Security benefits, he says. You can't try to stick something in the bill during your committee's consideration if it's not part of the committee you happen to be on. That's your basic turf war, he says, by rearing its heads. Quote, don't you dare tell me what I should do in my little kingdom, unquote. 3, it can't raise the deficit beyond the 10-year period of the act. But as I pointed out, how the hell can anybody know whether there's going to be a deficit between the 10-year period of the act? Answer, they can't. It's time CBO admitted that and just said they can't, and that has to be written out of the rules for reconciliation bills. That's so dumb. I can't. That's like total irrationality. I can't feature that. Then the 4th, it cannot somehow increase spending or reduce revenues if the committee hasn't met its own target set out in the resolution. Okay, so in other words, you can't put something in a reconciliation bill that would go beyond the framework that sets limits on the spending or sets limits on reducing revenues. Okay. So that can't be done. Now that is not really an entirely accurate statement of the limits, okay, of the bill. So I want to call your attention to the Wikipedia article on this, which I linked to, okay, as well. And I would love to share the screen on this, but my CPU is still not allowing me to do very much. And so I'm going to have to skip this with a recommendation that if you want to get a more precise statement of the limits of this, then go yourself to the Wikipedia article, okay, and pick this up. But for our purposes here, what Jonathan has said, we'll probably do. How is the Byrd Rule enforced? Any senator can object to a provision, raise a point of order, and if it is sustained by a 2/3 vote, the specific provision is deleted. So, someone can raise a point of order concerning a bill saying it's not consistent with the Byrd Rule. But that objection has to be sustained by a 2/3 vote. So realistically, what can happen is someone can put in a provision inside of the reconciliation bill that they think is consistent with the Byrd Rule, and somebody else in the Senate can file an objection, but they have to get a 2/3 vote. So lots of senators can file some sort of objection. Okay, but let's say Bernie wants to put in a Medicare for all provision. Okay, and he puts it in. And some Republican or some Democrat wants to raise a point of order with respect to it. That point of order won't be accepted, and the provision will not be deleted from the reconciliation bill. But unless that person can get a 2/3 vote of the Senate supporting the point of order. That's very important. The advantage here, picking and choosing provisions for deletion because they violate the Byrd rule, does not stop the whole bill. Well, of course, that's a big advantage. But another big advantage is that people can put in are able to put in provisions in the reconciliation bill that by all normal standards might be thought to be violating a provision of the Byrd rule. But if one party wants that provision in the reconciliation bill, and that party has a majority vote in the Senate, or even a substantial minority, the point of order would not be sustained by a 2/3 vote, and the provision would remain in the budget by reconciliation bill. So there it is. That gives Bernie a lot of attitude. Not attitude, latitude, as well as attitude. In the politics, the fifth columnists. Alas, with very narrow Democratic majorities in both houses, it will be a tight squeeze. I was on a UK radio program, on Inauguration Day, and the host asked me roughly, quote, "How will Biden get progressives on his side in the budget fights?" Unquote. Wrong question. Sure, progressives want much bigger spending, including passing Medicare for all. And more on Medicare for all in just a moment. But taking Bernie's rhetorical lead, they will push as hard as possible, but will accept the much larger, already outlined, Biden short-term relief COVID infrastructure spending as a down payment, quote unquote. The real problem will be with people like Joe Manchin, who is a fifth columnist. And I don't mean this in a good way. I mean this in the Norwegian way. And wannabe Republican in his economic outlook. Joe Manchin and a small group of deficit pearl clutchers will try to throw sand in the gears when it comes to big-time, huge spending, which we need to tell anyone who will listen is dumb economics. Even Janet Yellen, the soon-to-be Treasury Secretary and former chair of the Federal Reserve Board, and thus not a democratic socialist, says, he can say that again, says we need massive spending immediately, deficits be damned, especially with interest rates at rock bottom lows. And of course, he's right, but also, of course, there is no reason to float any debt instruments here along with the spending. There's no reason for the federal debt to be increased to support this spending. Why not? Because platinum coins can be used as proposed in the Automatic Boost to Communities Act by Rashida Tlaib. And if they're not used, then the Congress can do overt congressional financing, the addition of 2 sentences to any appropriations bill to provide both for paying down the national debt as it comes due and for any deficit spending that might be projected in the bill. So There's no need even to float any debt instruments and to even contend or have to cope with whether interest rates are at rock bottom lows or rock top highs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even in the House, you've got useless corporate mouthpieces like Kurt Schrader, Democrat, quote unquote, from origin. The D in quotes is intentional, who said he opposes giving people one-time $2,000 relief checks because it's too much to spend. Remember, a one-time 2K check is bad in itself, is a bad compromise compared to what yours truly and many others have argued for, and yours truly too, by the way. 2K relief checks every month as long as the economic collapse endures and as is called for in the aforesaid Automatic Boost to Communities Act. I'm including that, of course. So I would not assume the House is an entirely easy lift compared to the Senate. I think it's a lot easier lift than the Senate, though. A technical and political reality check for progressives. Sanders and the above linked to piece suggests, and others have encouraged the view that a reconciliation bill is a way to also roll in things like enacting Medicare for all or raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I'm all for trying, but in my humble opinion, that tactic should be done principally for the political education and organizing value because it's unlikely to succeed. It may be unlikely to succeed, but you know what? If the Democratic majority is for it, it will succeed because it can reject any point of order that is lodged against it on grounds of the Byrd Rule. Jonathan says, remember the Byrd Rule. If Bernie or someone else proposes to include the hiking of the minimum wage in a reconciliation bill, and assuming it gets approved in the Budget Committee, not a foregone conclusion, no, it's not, it's very likely that a Republican or fifth columnist, Joe Manchin, will raise a point of order arguing raising the minimum wage has nothing to do with spending and revenue and is not germane. But by the way, it would be easy for Bernie to submit to any debate on that particular subject, okay, an article that has come out pointing out that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would have very favorable budget consequences when it comes to increasing revenue, thus showing that increasing the minimum wage is germane to increasing revenue and therefore keeping reconciliation bills within the deficit framework within which they're set. There is a counter-argument to that, of course, says Jonathan Tassini, and he links to the roll call article that made that very point. Okay, so he's right about that. By the same token, Medicare for All is not going to sniff passage under reconciliation at the very least because of fifth columnist Joe Manchin, even though enacting Medicare for All is, in my humble opinion, 100% relevant to spending and revenue for the government. By the way, here's the following scenario. We go through a reconciliation bill, okay? Joe Manchin does lodge an objection to the bill on grounds of point of order. Let's say Joe Manchin doesn't get the 2/3 vote to sustain, okay, the point of order. Then the Medicare for All bill gets a vote on the floor, not simply the Medicare for All bill, but the whole reconciliation bill, including the popular aspects of it, whatever is the popular aspects apart from Medicare for All. The minimum wage provision, but let's say the but $2,000 checks were included. I don't think they should be in that bill, but let's say they were included in that bill. Okay, let's say it was all included, and it came down to a final Senate vote where Joe Manchin's vote had to be included as the 50th vote. Do you think the passage of this whole reconciliation bill, with its state and local aid for West Virginia, with its $2,000 checks for people in West Virginia, with its raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour for people in West Virginia, and with its Medicare for all for people in West Virginia, do you think that at that point, with the final vote coming around, that Joe Manchin would vote against that reconciliation bill? I think he would do it only if he wants to end his career in the Senate. I don't think he would have a ghost of a chance of getting reelected. I can just imagine the ads now Paula Jean Swearengin would be able to throw at him if she re-ran for the Senate, in the primaries. This time, she would beat him, in the primary. And I don't think any Republican would then be able to beat her in that kind of context. So I don't think Joe Manchin, he would do everything he could in order to try to block this. But if it came to a floor vote and all this was in, I think there's a pretty good bet he would end up going for Medicare for all. But, of course, Bernie has a big task in getting Medicare for all included in this bill. It's not going to be easy. He has to get it through his committee. He doesn't need a 2/3 vote of his committee to get it through. But remember, he needs at least a tie vote in the committee. So he better not have an anti-Medicare for all people person, inside the committee. One possible person who might be a barrier to this is Sheldon Whitehouse, who's sitting on the budget committee and who is terribly, terribly afraid of deficits because evidently he's never spoken to Stephanie Kelton. Anyway, people can whine all they want about the realities of the process. But that's the truth. Our job is to continue to build a power to make either the $15 an hour minimum wage hike or Medicare for all happen. And there's been a lot of great success on the minimum wage through state ballot initiatives. Not bang on Bernie Sanders when he either can't pass it or decides not to push it, though he certainly sees the wisdom of making a go for it. So, there it is. Jonathan Tassini also telling you people can whine all they want about the realities of the process. But that's the truth. That's what the process is like. And he points out our job is to continue to build the power, to work the process, to get control of the process, or to change the process. That's what it's about. That's why I wanted to get rid of Nancy Pelosi so bad, because that would be another way of changing the process. So, this will be an adult test for progressives. Which of the people are in this for the long haul? Understand, the political challenges and also willing to work to shift the political calculation versus who are the useless people who just retreat to social media to complain. That's important. An adult test. Which of the people are in this for the long haul, understand the political challenges, and also willing to work to shift the political calculation, versus who are the useless people who just retreat to social media to complain? I'm not going to answer that question. I leave that up to your judgment. There is one more remark here, not strictly in that post, but a bullet point that's made by Jonathan Tassini in a short tape. Why Chuck Schumer would even consider a power-sharing deal with the Republicans is totally beyond me. Underscores how weak he is as a leader Just yesterday, McConnell stood on the Senate floor and his usual amoral, rhetorical rewriting of history pretended like he hadn't blown up the whole Senate and ignored institutional rules in his insatiable thirst for power. You can absolutely bet if the tables were reversed, he wouldn't care a whit if there was a 50-50 Senate and his party's vice president was in the Senate chair to break ties. If it was up to me, I'd write the Senate rules on a piece of paper, including getting rid of the filibuster. I would label it, quote, Mr. Merrick Garland says hi, unquote, and shove it down McConnell's throat with my middle finger, says Jonathan Tassini. I thought that one was wonderful. But to give a little prop to Chuck Schumer, he stood on the ground this morning in New York City giving a little bit of a press conference, and he informed people that the Democrats had three things that they wanted to get done. And among those things was COVID relief, economic relief, and healthcare relief with respect to COVID. And he also said that he would do whatever had to be done to get that through. And he mentioned specifically reconciliation. But more important, when pushed further by the reporters, he said, rather strongly, I thought, we will use every tool available to us to get this through. Okay, but Mitch McConnell is no longer the minority leader of the Senate, and he is not going to make the decisions about what tools we use on this. It will be Democrats who will be making the decisions, and we will use every tool available to us to get these acts through as quickly as we can. I was encouraged by that. It's the strongest statement that I'd ever seen from Schumer. And I think he was basically telling McConnell, no filibuster this time. No soup for you. No soup for you. So that's what I thought he was saying to McConnell. Let's hope that I am right. Okay, I will now go back to your comments, have my usual comment period for at least a little while, because miracle of miracles, I'm not at all tired. And Barney says, oh, Joe. Okay, so let's see. Oh, this is running like I have. No, my CPU is still at 100%. I have no idea what the hell's going on. And the very last time, I was on with a much heavier load on my system. I couldn't get over 20% use, of CPU. Now I'm up to 100% use of CPU. I don't know what's going on. I only got about 20% use of memory. This is totally dragging me down. But since I'm not going to pull up any other articles, I have another thing I can do to maybe cut down the load on the CPU. Let's see what just happened. Just a hunch I have. Well, at least it's not at 100% anymore. So let's see. All right, so here we are. Back to your comments. So we got, let's go through the shares. Evelina says screen frozen. Dia says, yeah, I'm just getting a lot of the spinny thing. Evelina says, okay, it's back. Steve says, the government is putting up signs in my neighborhood saying this is a high-risk COVID area. Some neighbors have died. Very surreal. Keep safe, Steve. Wear a face shield, okay, as well as a mask. A face shield, too. Okay, there's a kind that goes over your nose and fits like a pair, okay, of glasses. Those shields, okay, are only $1 a piece, and Costco has them. And if you wear them over a mask, I know you also have a very good mask, okay, N95 mask. That will give you some extra protection. And so Dia says, is your device off because there's an update that's lingering to be updated? It always makes my device misbehave like this. Is my device off? You mean any other collateral devices I might have on? As far as I know, I don't have any other devices off. I mean, I don't have any other devices on. No, I don't have any other devices on. So it shouldn't be a problem. So Kay says, retire and come to Ohio, Steve. Kay says, be nice to have a like-minded friend here. Steve says, thanks. Lena says, hi, folks. Please remember to like and share this video. I'm eating dinner watching on my YouTube. By the way, I should mention, okay, at this point, that I did the reconciliation thing this time in response to Lana's request. But for that, okay. Evelina says, not enough to run on identity politics or have a Spanish name. That was Gina Ortiz-Jones. I'm telling you, she was running on identity politics, and she had a Spanish name, and that's basically why the D-Trip was running her. Dia Swift, just to let folks know there aren't any ads for these live streams on YouTube, but commenting is not as much fun or as interactive as on other social media. Also, only limited characters allowed. Dia says, very true, progressives have to fight the establishment on many sides, many knives in their backs, yes. And Lana says, lost the feed. Dia says, I really hope Biden doesn't try to bring back the punitive mandate of the ACA, that you have to pay a fine if you don't buy the ACA. Well, if they do a compromise which simply lowers the age of Medicare for people to 50 and 25K and under, the mandate is not involved in that, at all. So they won't have to change the mandate for the remainder of the ACA, which will then cover people from 26 to 50. In other words, the ACA will then only apply to those people. That wouldn't even involve the repeal of the ACA. It would just make the Medicare program available to people. Now, also, I think what they should do is to refine the Medicare for those who have it, so that it has the same benefits as specified in the Jayapal bill. Steve Wolfbrand says, we need vaccinations now. We do. Biden says, Biden ain't giving us Medicare for all, and worse, COVID variants are coming expeditiously. I know, like the South African variant, that according to analyses, has a chance of escaping the effectiveness of the vaccine, or at least cutting down on the effectiveness of the vaccines we have thus far. But there are other vaccines coming online, like the Oxford AstraZeneca is coming online, and supposedly a vaccine from Johnson & Johnson will soon be ready. And if I'm not mistaken, that particular vaccine will be a single-shot vaccine, So that will be very popular and very important. Lana Del hates the clock says there will be more people to interact with here if we share the video. Kay says Schumer is afraid of a progressive, the primarying against him. He's been going farther left the last year or so. I know. And guess who he's afraid of? We know. We all know. Steve Wolfbrand says a mother and her adult daughter who had what we used to call Mongolian. I can't actually remember the correct term. These neighbors were popular and died of COVID. It's very sad here. I'm really sorry to hear it, Steve. I'm sure it's getting sadder and sadder in many parts of the country. At least this administration gives every evidence of a strong will to respond to this. Okay, and Dia Swift said, is all our survival funding checks going to end up in ACA, exploitive for-profit, healthcare coffers, spelling? I don't think so. I don't think the survival checks are going to end up in that for-profit thing. And Dia says, because of COVID, and especially after COVID complications in long-term treatments. Kay says, Steve, I'd be afraid to live in California, especially the LA area. My daughter is living in the area, Kay, as I've often said. Evelina says, important distinction you make, Dr. Joe, between getting commitments in Congress and getting them in a task force. Yeah, I mean, it's two different worlds. Okay, I don't know what purpose it serves to lump them together like this. She should have made that particular distinction herself. She should have pointed that out. Evelina has the exclamation point. Kay says, hope Nina Turner wins in Ohio to go there soon. So do I. I'm really pulling for Nina. I think that Nina is likely to institute some backbone in that group, some further needed backbone. I think, to be fair, I think the people in that group already have considerable backbone. But Nina can do even more to light a fire under them than AOC, maybe. Steve Wolfbrand said, yes, Kay, Nina Turner. Kay says, I think she has a good chance in her district, fingers crossed. I do too. It's a Democratic district. If she wins the primary, she wins the district. Steve Wolfbrand said, it's good, Doc. Real progressives running the caucus. Yeah, it is. That is good. Lana says, I agree that mandate was horrible. It was horrible and it was unnecessary. It hasn't affected the ACA at all not to have the mandate. It hasn't had any impact on coverage whatsoever. The idea that it was necessary was stupid. Steve Wolfbrand said she will win. Kay says, I never call Ohio elections. Laugh out loud. People are very weird here. The rigging of the machines is very weird where you are. Kay says, Steve, I heard today Tom Ryan might run for governor in 22. Tom Ryan or Tim Ryan? Steve says, what is the meaning of the Bernie Mittens phenomenon? I don't know what the Bernie Mittens phenomenon, the meaning of the Bernie just thought he'd make a great image with those mittens, but more importantly, he probably thought he would keep warm. He probably thought he would keep warm, and he didn't care how the frick he looked. He wore his only jacket when it gets real cold. He loves that one, so he wore it. He knew it was going to get real cold. And he probably knew with the mittens he'd probably steal the show. Kay says Tim Ryan. Evelina says another important distinction. It's Jayapal, who is the leader on Medicare for All, not AOC. It is Jayapal because she was there first. She was there first. And she wrote the damn bill. Okay, and she wrote it, by the way, with the external interests I was talking about. She consulted very closely with PNHP and Healthcare Now and many, many other groups she's been in coordination with. I really admire her work on her Medicare for All bill. She had a better bill than Bernie. She has a better bill than Bernie. Kay says, I think Bernie has been missed but very badly, Steve. I think so too. Steve says, that photo strangely mesmerized millions of people. I know. And Kay says, yes, it has. Even my old WMMS radio page here in Ohio. Yeah, good story always gets them. They go for the clicks, they go for the clicks. But what they go for is the sizzle, folks. It's not the steak. You'll know they go for the steak when they come out in support of Medicare for all. But until then, they're just interested in going with the BS. Lana Dell says, is there anything that prevents the House or Senate from bringing a bill back to the floor after it's defeated? No. Do they have to create a new bill? No. They can bring back the same bill. They can bring back that bill 20 times if they want. The mitten phenomenon is about liberals wanting to laugh at him for his attire. It backfired. We love his attire. Fuck liberals. Steve Wolfbrand says, well, that's one opinion. Could you please qualify that, Barbara, and say neoliberals? Because some of us, old liberals, who are more progressive than most of the progressives today, resent the fact that they're using this term to refer to people like Joe Biden, who was never much of a liberal, not from the first day he set foot in Congress. Steve Wolfbrand said, well, that's one opinion. And Dia Swift said, I just don't want fascist Trump to soar back in 24 because Democrats suck and are weak like always. Yeah, me too. But I don't want fascist Cruz or fascist Hawley or fascist Cotton or any of the dozens of fascists they have running around in the Republican Party to soar back in 24 because Democrats suck and are weak like always. Evelina says, huh?
The DCC.
And the DNC.
Right.
And the DCCC. Okay. And the DSCC, by the way, which is the Democratic Senatorial, what does CC stand for? Congressional Campaign Committee. We need a floor vote on Medicare for all, simple as that. And Steve Wolfbrand says, yes, it is. We need a floor vote for it. We do. But we need a floor vote when we have people all coordinated, all ready to back it, having the campaign ready to go. Kay says, if you give people Medicare for all to people for this emergency, then try to take it away later, laugh out loud, I doubt that would go over very well. Yeah, me too. That's why they don't want to give people Medicare for all for this emergency. It's a no-brainer from the standpoint of the emergency, but of course, they would rather subject people to death, to the risk of death. In fact, to unnecessary deaths, because statistically, it is nearly a certainty that many, many people will die because they don't have Medicare for all, but they would rather kill people. They would rather kill people than give them Medicare for all. They've proved that every single year because we've known that people die due to lack of insurance every single year, but they've still insisted on putting forward healthcare reform plans that leave people uncovered. So they're telling you that they think the conventional healthcare industry and their interests are worth killing people for. Both parties have been saying that for ages to us. They don't say it out loud, but they've been saying that to us for ages, that we support the murderers by spreadsheet. That's what's been going on. Dear Swift, or someone says, or someone even worse than Donald, like Cruz or Cotton. I'm so tired of these Klan mofos. Steve Wolfbrand said, I really can't explain the mittens phenomenon.
I thought it was fun.
I can't explain it either. I think in part it's fun. People just like fun, they just like a joke. And the other thing is, it makes some people feel good because they couldn't swallow Bernie. They couldn't swallow getting Bernie as the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. But they knew in their heart how good a person he was, that they should be supporting him. And so now they just have to find ways to give him props that are not dangerous to them and their position in society. So maybe that's what it's about. Anyway, Dia Swift says, Joe Manchin may as well be a Republican. I guess they pretty much all are, except for a few progressives. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I would say that maybe there are 20 Democratic senators who might qualify as progressives. There are probably 10 who can't be counted on for progressive votes, even if the progressives won over the party, that they would be difficult to get, even cases like that. And there are probably another 20 who are party Democrats who will go for whatever position is supported by progressives if that position is also supported by the party in the House they're in, supported by Nancy Pelosi or supported by Chuck Schumer, or looking outside of the party if supported by Joe Biden. So maybe you can mobilize 40 votes for a progressive thing the party is willing to support for sure, but those extra 10 votes are like pulling teeth. And I pretty much can name the 10, but I'm not going to name that here because that would too long. Anyway, Jayapal is on point. Barbara Wernick says M4A is an unwinnable fight at this point. When M4A wins, we'll know change has come. I'm not sure it's an unwinnable fight. I mean, it may be at this moment on January 24th. But when you say, okay, at this moment, I'm looking within the window of 6 months, I'm not sure it's an unwinnable fight over the next 6 months. It depends on a lot on what else is won over those 6 months. If COVID is contained over the next 6 months, if those $2,000 checks are passed through, and if more than just a single one comes, and if the political credits start to pile up for the Democratic Party, and if we mobilize party voters for Medicare for All over the next 6 months, and the campaign goes on and on and on for Medicare for All, then maybe we'll be able to win it in the window of 6 months. Kathy Dupre says, I disagree, Joe. We are very much in touch, okay, with Jayapal. Kathy Dupree, I don't know who you are, but I think I'm pretty much in touch with social media folks and with Twitter folks who are part of the Medicare for All movement, and they are not very much in touch with Jayapal and her plans. She's not talking to them through Twitter. Okay, and AOC and some of the others have been constrained a bit from talking to them through their Twitter accounts as well. I think the reason why AOC was not more forthcoming to the critics, to the criticisms she was getting, okay, on Twitter during the last 2 weeks of 2020 was because the planning, okay, was going on, and she did not have a definite position on the planning that was worked out because she and the squad were talking to Jayapal. Part of their negotiations were getting something from Jayapal as well as getting something from Nancy Pelosi. So they were talking to Jayapal. Jayapal, I think, was negotiating with Pelosi on behalf of them, that they were not acting as a squad together doing the negotiations with respect to, I think they were negotiating through Ro Khanna and through Jayapal and through the CPC. Because why were they doing this? Because they think they're stronger if they work with the whole CPC, and they were interested in reforming the CPC to make it stronger. That was the plan of the squads, one of their priorities. They thought that was the way they would get Medicare for all. And remember, they're not just one shot with respect to Medicare for all. They're trying to get the whole Green New Deal and the just transition to, and criminal justice reform. Black Lives Matter stuff. Very, very important. Stopping the murder of people on the streets. Very, very important. And student debt elimination, and free college, and the housing problem. All this is in the balance. They've got to get a stronger CPC for all this. So this matters to them too. It's not just all about the single issue of Medicare for all, though it's an overwhelmingly important issue, no question. Steve says, and free college. Kay says, our revolution members are everywhere now. They are. That's true. But they're not all of the unorganized, and they're not all of the bottom up. And our revolution is not that bottom up itself. Barbara says they must be held accountable. If they don't fight, vote them out. I think maybe they are fighting, but not in the way that we want them to fight. We wanted them to hold Pelosi, or the Force the Vote campaign wanted them to hold Pelosi up until she agreed to have a floor vote, okay, for Medicare for all. I think that was less than a helpful position. In fact, I think it was stupid. I think they should have been going for hashtag replace Pelosi, then force the vote. Meaning, don't negotiate with Pelosi. Get rid of her. Get someone else who was more favorable, or at least neutral, when it came to Medicare for all. And in the process, you negotiate with them for rules changes, for floor votes, for better committee positions, for all that. They could have gotten so much. They got the pay-go concession with respect to COVID and with respect to Green New Deal stuff, but not for everything else. I mean, they could still use pay-go generally for budget stuff, for other things. Why couldn't they get rid of pay-go completely? They could have demanded that completely if they were negotiating with a new candidate who absolutely needed their votes to get in. That new candidate would have had to have given them everything they asked for. Diaz says they made a secret deal with Pelosi. They did. Without consulting us, they made a secret deal. Yes. Even though many of us, the unorganized people, many of us did much to get them into office, every one of the squad. It was our activism, our contributions that helped them. Contributions from the national movement, not just from people in their districts. Activism from the national movement on social media, not just in their districts, but they felt free not to consult us. Steve says, that's us, self-organizing. Diaz says, so many folks will be able to work because of COVID, unable to work because of the after effects of COVID. So the ACA isn't going to help. they'll have to file for SSDI and will die and suffer needlessly for being denied. Perish the thought. Absolutely. Those people and everybody else who needs it should also be eligible for basic income of $2,000 a month going forward. Lana hates the clock, says Dia. I think you are right. Very sad. Kay says, might sound silly, but I really miss all of you on the nights we don't have these discussions. Well, we miss you too, Kay. I mean, we really do. I can't go 7 days a week on here. Even though I love it, these sessions take time to arrange, okay, to organize. The programming takes time. I'm the only one here. I don't have a team. Okay, I get some help in doing some of the graphics, the promo graphics from a generous and wonderful soul. But that's really all the help, okay, I have. I get some help in terms of suggestions from people, but I'm the one going through all the materials. I'm the one managing the technical stuff. And I'm the one, doing the live streams. This is basically a one-person show. And yes, okay, I need the theme music, but okay, I need someone to help me to pick out, okay, the theme music, okay, and then to do a video with the theme music that will go along with the promos. That's what I need. I mean, I know what I need, but it'll get implemented someday. You don't have to convince me that I need the theme music. All you have to do is get me some help, and I'll get the theme music. And Steve has a heart. Okay, and Dia Swift says, by reconciliation is Democrats begging the Republicans not to tear them a new one. I would say it's the actual reconciliation bills are better than that, because Republicans have used them a number of times to their advantage. And he says, thanks, Lana. No more for Democrats pandering, neoliberal appeasement, and time-consuming incrementalism. Steve says, sing Les Miserables. And Dia says, he can sing Les Miserables. Well, I have to refresh myself on the words. But Bonnie doesn't want me to sing Les Miserables. Anyway, if I sang it, I'd have to get some license or give them a royalty or something. And I can't afford that. And Lana says, incrementalism sucks and will bring us another Trump. I agree. We can't have incrementalism. Dia says, I can hear the Russian people sing for Navalny. Solidarity. Yes, I understand that Mr. Navalny is a fascist. So I'm not sure that I am for Mr. Navalny. Yes. Can you hear the people singing a song of angry men?
Joey.
It's the music of a people who will not be slaves again. There it is. Dia says, yes, Lana, that's what worries me. Sick. Barbara says, M4A is the gambit. Until we win that, we haven't won. That's our test. So that's the litmus test. But if we win only that, we still haven't won, because if we don't have the Green New Deal, we're going to cease to exist. That's the truth. We're going to cease to exist. The only chance for the world is for the United States to get aboard and get off fossil fuels. By 2030, folks. It can't be by 2050. We got to get off this crap. Dia says, why aren't they, the Republicans on Capitol Hill, not dropping like flies? They refuse masks. They report getting COVID all the time, but rarely croak. Come on, Reaper, what's wrong with your radar? Well, as a percentage, the death rate from COVID is not that high yet. So it's just a case of statistics. How many Republicans are involved? What is it, 207 Republicans in the House right now, something like that, 208 Republicans, 209 Republicans, something like that, 222 Democrats. So that means that even if 10 of them have gotten COVID, that's probably a high percentage at this point. And Lana laughs, says laugh out loud. Dia says laugh out loud. That's also the case when it comes to trickle-down economics. It's P. And K says, we got Medicare for all. We would all be free to go anywhere we wanted to go. It would be a big relief to me to get out of Medicaid, who makes me stay under $2,000 a month. Can't save any money, even when I can. Yep. Evelyn says, the sweetest thing I ever heard you have, Bonnie, Evelina said. Thank you. Steve says, social life. What social life? This is our social life. Yes, it sure is mine, Steve. Evelina says, the social democrat, yes. There are other priorities as well, even if you're not. Dia says, Bird, not the Dixiecrat. Yeah, Bird was for Medicare for all. In his old age, he wasn't really a Dixiecrat. He ceased to be a Dixiecrat. He was still kind of an autocrat. Evelina says, even if you are, I meant. Dia says, oh, yes, he was a Klan. Thought so. Thanks for clarifying, Joe. He was a Klan guy when he was younger. I don't think he was a Klan guy. I think after he got to the Senate, he sort of distanced himself considerably from the Klan. And by the way, as I said, he became a Medicare for All supporter. He and Ted Kennedy became very close over a period of time. Kay said, where is Carmen tonight? Carmen is still in FB jail, but I haven't heard from her for a couple of days. So I don't know what's going on. For a while, she was emailing me each day. And telling me what was going on. I hope she's okay. If I hear from her, I will certainly give you some news. Kay says, bummer, and Dear Swift says, in-depth anthem. Do you hear the people sing the song of every man? Not be slaves again, when the beating of your heart echoes the beating of the drum. There's a life about to start. I think there's a new life about to start, isn't it? Something like that. Steve Gonzo says, looks like the Patriot Party has filed docs. Donald J. Trump for president, incorporated with the FEC. Well, the Patriot Party still has to establish itself in some state, right? It's not established in any state yet. Kay says that might break up the GOP. It might also break up the Democrats. The reason why I say that is because if the GOP is going to break up into two parts, where more than half the GOP is actually for Donald J. Trump, and there are corporatists, who are in the Democratic Party, and corporatists that are left, to make up the Republican Party, who are not for Donald Trump. Then the progressives, inside the real Democratic Party, will not have to be so afraid of stepping outside of the Democratic Party. If there's a movement outside of the Democratic Party that is willing to stand for all the progressives want and has a movement in back of them outside of the Democratic Party, then why wouldn't a bunch of the progressive people inside of the Democratic Party just say, hell, let's just split off and join the other party? It's not going to guarantee a Trump win. Anyway, okay, I wonder, it might bring more of the corporatists over to the Republican side as well. There are clearly people in the Democratic Party now because they just can't feature Trump. They just won't affiliate with a party that's headed by Donald Trump. They might feel comfortable going back to the GOP where they started out, as long as Trump K isn't in it. And therefore, there may be people from the Democratic side, like Joe Manchin, who go to the GOP. I don't know, but there's a possibility that might happen. Okay, it might stay three parties, with a middle party being a corporate party and having a progressive party on the left wing. If the progressives inherit the Democratic Party from corporatists, then probably there would be no more need for the movement for a People's Party. Then the People's Party might essentially meld into the Democratic Party. I don't know. It creates new possibilities for dynamics inside the party system. Oh, by the way, if Trump starts establishing an outside party, the Trumpists are going to want to go for ranked choice voting, because they'll think ranked choice voting is going to benefit them, because they'll think they might be the second choice of some conservatives who otherwise might stick with the mainstream Democrats. So it says, continued when tomorrow comes, will you join in our crusade? Who will be strong and stand with me? Beyond the barricade, is there a world you long to see? Then join in the fight that will give you the right to be free. Just a sample from Do You Hear the People Sing? Yes. And Lana says, thanks for the verbiage. Dia says, good vibes. It is good vibes. Those are the vibes, okay, I like.
Good night.
And Kay says, Joe Manchin needs to go ASAP. And Dia says, God, I hope like hell Manchin never runs for president, because idiots will vote for him. And Joe F. Hernandez. Okay, folks. Okay, I'm going to have to say goodnight now, I think. I think the time has come. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I wasn't able to finish going through the comments. I will try to do that at a later time. Most of the comments are on Facebook. So, no, actually most of Dia's are, actually most of the comments probably are on YouTube. Okay, because Dia is putting in a good many comments. And they are on the YouTube stream, not on the Facebook stream. So I will try to go to both, okay, and answer the comments. So anyway, good night, and thank you all for coming. This has been a very long stream. I'll talk about the filibuster next time. Tomorrow night, will most probably not be a stream, but I have some other short takes, okay, that I want to get out. I should say before I close, I did 4 short takes today, okay, a little bit earlier. And they're on Facebook and YouTube, okay, as well. And you might want to take a look at them, okay.
Sweet dreams.
I think you might find them engaging. Anyway, Bonnie says, sweet dreams, and thank you all for coming.